Hello, and welcome to the Institute of Southern Jewish Life session on using the ISJL curriculum, the basics. Today, we are going to talk about the basics of the wonderfully transformational, transdenominational, comprehensive, fully scripted ISJL curriculum. Throughout this lesson, we will show how the ISJL spirals can turn anyone into a rock star Sunday school teacher. With an overlook of each grade, an in-depth look at fully scripted activities, and a breakdown of different optional and adaptable lessons, we plan to look at each aspect of our curriculum to ensure each teacher is the most prepared to move the ISJL to the classroom. At the Institute of Southern Jewish Life, we believe that every Jewish child deserves an excellent Jewish education, no matter the size of their community. This starts in the classroom, with teachers and facilitators like you. In the next few slides, we will explore the big picture of the ISJL curriculum. The ISJL curriculum ranges from grades pre-K through 12. Each grade visits 10 key content areas with increased sophistication as they progress throughout the curriculum. The 10 key content areas include community, holidays, mitzvot, Tanakh, which is an acronym for Torah, prophets, and writings, God, Hebrew, Israel, culture, lifestyle, and history. In touching upon these key content areas that increase in sophistication with each grade, the ISJL curriculum is developmentally appropriate for nurturing students' Jewish identity and equipping them to live meaningful lives. Through visiting each of these key content areas, students will find meaning, connection, and community. Each grade has 30 2-hour lessons, including Hebrew. Each grade provides class-by-class lesson plans, which includes everything from the big ideas to the finer details, such as supplies. The curriculum also provides a script and time allocation for teachers who want that extra guidance in the classroom. Speaking of some finer details, each student has a variety of different learning styles. All activities in each of the lessons are coded to a specific learning style. Visual, auditory, and kinesthetic learning styles are used to code each lesson. You will see VAK coded as a combination of letters above the time allocation part as shown in the image on the screen. Our last piece of information about the ISJL curriculum is our supplements. Supplements are separate pieces of curriculum that are not included in the pre-K through 12th grade curriculum. Although the supplements are similarly structured to the traditional curriculum, they offer some extra learning for members of your community. Some supplements included are Madrakim curriculum and family curriculum. Now, it's your turn to do some searching in your curriculum book. Pause the video and open your curriculum book to find what the big ideas, supplies, and time allocation for Activity 1 in Lesson 11 are. When finished, continue on. Now that you have a basic overview of the ISJL curriculum structure, we will dive a little deeper into the structure of the lessons inside our ISJL curriculum books. When you open an ISJL curriculum book, one of the very first things you will see is the table of contents. It looks something like this. Here, you will find the lesson number and the name of the lesson on the left side of the page, and the page number where you can find that lesson on the right. Once you flip to the page number the lesson is on, there are a few things you will encounter before the scripted part of the lesson appears. First, you will see the big ideas. This is where the takeaways of the lesson are described. For this lesson, the big ideas are Jewish values help guide our behavior and inform our choices. Our lives are journeys marked with events from the Jewish life cycle. Every Jew should have a knowledge of the modern state of Israel and the history of the land. Jewish values help us connect to every aspect of Judaism, including the life cycle and the state of Israel. Next, you will see the student should be able to section. These are the measurable objectives that students will take away from the lesson. For this lesson, the skills students will acquire are explaining the distinction between contentment and exuberance, naming a moment during their Jewish lives they would celebrate with exuberance, and explaining why both joy and sadness are important to overall joy. The next section you will see are the texts. As you can see, the text required for this lesson is the ISJL 5th grade Hebrew curriculum. You'll then notice the supplies section. In this case, the supplies needed for this lesson include a computer or appropriately sized electronic device with access to the internet, speakers, paper, pens and pencils, and a prayer book, one per student. After supplies, you will encounter the Other Things to Prepare section. For this lesson, the curriculum asks you to prepare copies of the attached appendices for the students and to load YouTube videos for them to view. Just after these sections, you will find the vocabulary section. Listed here are the Hebrew vocab words Ziman Simchatenu, which means our time of joy, and Simcha, or joy. Last but not least is the 4 optional activities section. As you can see, the materials required to run the optional activities attached to this lesson include a copy of the film Inside Out, markers, and poster board. All of this information in just the very first pages of our lesson prepares you for the activities ahead. Speaking of the activities, each one of the activities listed in our lesson will have a title, a time frame for how long the activity will take, and either a V, A, K, or a combination of those letters to indicate what learning style that activity covers. Within these activities, you will notice at times that there are unscripted directions. These are known as direct instructions. These instructions are to help teachers make sure that supplies are handed out when needed, timers are set, and so on. At times in the direct instructions, you'll see that appendices are to be handed out to students. An appendix can be found at the very end of the lesson, and they look something like this. Appendices are used within the activities and are there to aid in the lesson. Appendices can include anything from song lyrics to coloring pages to images and more. This instruction will always be stated earlier in the lesson in the Other Things to Prepare section, as you can see here. Usually, teachers will be instructed to copy these and hand them out to students so students can follow along or complete part of the activity. Now, pause the video and open your curriculum book to the table of contents and find Lesson 6. Go through the lesson and familiarize yourself with the big ideas, students should be able to's, supplies, vocabulary, other things to prepare, and appendices. Now that you have a basic overview of the ISJL curriculum books and basic structure of the lessons, it's time for you to dive a bit deeper. The first couple of pages in a lesson serve to set the scene, prepare not only you, the teacher, but also the students, should they need anything out of the ordinary for the day's lesson, and get you ready to teach. These pages are not a part of the actual content of the lesson like the activities we will cover later, but they are here as preparatory pages to help serve you as a teacher, introduce you to the lesson at a glance, and get you more organized. The first section you will see on the very first page of a lesson is the big ideas. The big ideas are essentially the thesis statements that we can pull from the lesson, or the main ideas and themes that are the most important within the lesson. Here you see that Lesson 6 from the 5th grade curriculum is about simcha, or joy, and the first big idea mentioned is appropriately simcha, joy, is a Jewish value that encourages us to strive to be happy and find joy. After the big ideas come the students should be able to's. These are the takeaways from the lesson. They are what we hope the students will gain from the lesson to be had, and the measurable objectives students should be able to do after they have learned the content within the lesson. If you want to know if you've covered what you need to from a lesson, take a quick peek back at those students should be able to's and check to see if your students can recall or perform the items listed. Check out these measurable objectives. After having had this lesson, students should be able to explain the distinction between contentment and exuberance, name a moment during their Jewish lives they would celebrate with exuberance, and explain why both joy and sadness are important to overall joy. In certain lessons, you may need an outside text to accompany the learning for that lesson. In every lesson you teach, you will always see a supplies list. Next, you'll see the other things to prepare. This section informs you of, well, other things that need to be prepared before this lesson is in session, such as printing appendices out, hanging certain appendices up on the wall, laying the classroom out a certain way, things to prepare like this to make sure that everyone has everything they need to be the most present and ready to learn. We like to say that our curriculum is written so that Marty the Martian or any person you find either with or without experience in the Jewish world or within a classroom could pick up a lesson and be ready to teach. The vocabulary section really helps with this. In addition to all the other great resources, lists, and mental checklists that the first couple of pages in a lesson provide, the vocabulary section also serves to help a teacher, especially if they are unfamiliar with the Hebrew language, pronounce and be able to define any Hebrew words that may show up in the lesson. Even the best of us Jewish educators need a refresher or a reminder on how to transliterate that Hebrew vocab word you haven't heard since you were in religious school, so make sure to refer to this as needed. And finally, before we get to the really fun stuff in our wonderful ISJL curriculum, we have the additional notes. For those of you who teach these lessons, like most everything else in the first few pages of an ISJL lesson, the additional notes are meant to help best prepare you to teach an awesome and engaging lesson for your students. Additional notes may include some best practices for maintaining participation in the classroom, letting you know of something you'll need to get set up or in place ahead of time for a lesson or two ahead, some information to provide if a question is asked by a student, or anything else that the ISJL team has thought through that you may need to know when teaching a lesson and leading a classroom. Well, folks, all the bases have been covered in the first couple of pages of an ISJL curriculum lesson. Why don't you pause here to test your knowledge with a matching game, just to make sure you're up to speed and ready to move on to the bulk of how great the rest of the ISJL's curriculum is. Now that you understand the preparatory parts of a lesson, we'll now show you how to navigate the lesson itself. Each lesson begins with a set induction. This first part of the lesson is meant to set the tone for the classroom. It has you, the teacher, invite the students to prepare themselves for the activities ahead. Oftentimes, the set induction will have you conduct a welcoming ritual with your class. In this case, you will take attendance, collect tzedakah, and introduce them to the Jewish value being taught. As you will see with the activities, the set induction has a time estimate, giving you a sense of how long it will take you to complete that portion of the lesson. In this case, the set induction should last approximately 5 minutes. In addition, you'll notice two symbols found throughout each of the lessons in our curriculum. The first is the large quotation symbol. This symbol indicates when you should speak to your students. The sentences and paragraphs attached to this symbol will have you make declarative statements as opposed to asking questions, which are represented with the large question mark, seen here. All of the lessons in our curriculum are fully scripted, so you don't have to worry about figuring out what you're going to say to your students. Now that you're familiar with the set induction, let's take a look at what a typical ISJL curriculum activity looks like. The activities are what make up the bulk of an ISJL lesson. Most lessons have students complete 3 or 4 engaging and fun activities that help them reinforce a specific concept, in this case, the Jewish value simcha, or joy. Each lesson will list the name of the activity, its time estimate, and which learning styles this activity engages. Each activity in our curriculum will have at least one of the following 3 letters appear next to it: V, A, or K. These letters represent the 3 learning styles that we incorporate into our curriculum: visual, auditory, and kinesthetic. As you can see, this activity engages students' visual and auditory learning capabilities. You will see how in just a moment. For now, pause the video and answer the following questions. What 3 learning styles does the ISJL curriculum incorporate? If you answered all 3 learning styles, you are correct. Now, let's run through an activity together. We'll use the second activity in this lesson, which has students work together in groups to create a skit based off of quotes from Jewish sources. Each of the quotes express what Judaism has to say about happiness and can be found in one of the appendices attached to this lesson, seen here. Take a moment to pause the video and see if you can identify what type of activity this is. Is it visual, auditory, kinesthetic, or a combination of each? If you answered that it involves all 3, you are correct. Notice the first part of the activity has you read out instructions to your students. This is indicated by the quotation symbol. Pause the video and try reading the instructions yourself. Pretend you are in the classroom, explaining to the students what to do in this scenario. Moving on, you'll notice this next paragraph has neither a quotation nor a question mark attached to it. Whenever you see these types of paragraphs, you'll know that this part of the lesson is strictly for you and not meant to be read aloud to the students. In this case, you are told which materials need to be given to each student, how you should divide them into groups and what their assignment is, how long they have to complete the assignment, and what they will do once they are done. Take a moment to pause the video and answer the following question. If a sentence or paragraph in the lesson is not attached to a quotation or question mark, what does that mean? The last part of this activity has you pose a question to the students. Notice the bullet points. Most of the time, when you see a question in the curriculum, it will have a bulleted list of potential answers your students might give when you ask it. These are meant to serve as a guidepost for what sort of response you should look for from them. In this case, if they answer with any of these following items, they understand the question being posed to them. Before we discuss the final part of the lesson, the closure, I'd like to bring your attention to the Hebrew portion of the lesson. It is often listed right above the closure in the lesson and references which portion of the Hebrew curriculum you'll want to lead your students through that day. As with the set induction and the activities, you'll notice the Hebrew lesson also has a time estimate attached to it. Take a moment to pause the video and answer the following question. What 3 parts of the lesson have we covered so far? If you answered the set induction, the activities, and the Hebrew lesson, You are correct. Now, let's take a look at the closure. Just as the set induction sets the tone for the day and makes students feel welcome in your classroom, the closure is the portion of the lesson that reinforces the concepts they have learned and allows them to engage in a common ritual done at the end of each week's lesson. As with the other sections of the lesson, the closure has a time estimate, instructions meant for you, the teacher, instructions to give the students, and a question to ask the students. Unlike the other sections, the closure often involves a common activity that the students will do to end each week's class. In this case, the 5th grade students will fill out a value voucher for each Jewish value they learn about. The vouchers are printed on this appendix, which each student will receive when they come into class that week. As the students learn more Jewish values, they will accumulate more vouchers and put them in a suitcase to keep throughout the year. Now that you understand how to navigate the different sections of a lesson in our curriculum, you are ready to move on to the optional activities to learn more about how they can enhance your teaching experience. If you do not always think the activities in any particular lesson are what you are looking for, do not fret. Each ISJL lesson is fitted with optional activities that can either be added to the activities in a lesson or replace a pre-existing activity to optimize your lesson. All optional activities go with the lesson they are paired with to allow for seamless integration if any optional activity were to be placed in the lesson. Replacing or adding an optional activity into the lesson allows for adjustment to a specific subject matter or materials if the class needs a different type of learning style. This can include replacing a video with a craft or adjusting the length of a lesson if a teacher wishes to add or replace an activity based on the time allotted for a class. Optional activities will always be right after the conclusion of the original lesson. Any materials or other preparation will be listed on the first pages of each lesson under Other Things to Prepare and 4 Optional Activities. Let's test this out. On the screen, you will see a list of activities, both in the lesson and optional. Unfortunately, right before class, your computer decides to stop working and you are thinking about how to spend the time in class in which you are going to play a video. Think about which optional activity would work best to add to your lesson to make sure class is still the same length and the most engaging it can be. This optional activity would be a good choice to replace your original plan with because it has a similar theme, is just as engaging, and takes up the same amount of class time. Now that we know the basics of the curriculum, there is still so much more we can dive into when it comes to implementing the curriculum into the classroom. While our curriculum is created in order to turn everyone into fantastic teachers, there are still facets that can always be looked at a little closer. One of those, for example, is the letter to the teacher that is found at the start of every spiral of curriculum. This letter provides an overview of all the different topics and themes found throughout the lessons and will help guide the teacher through each section. With the curriculum broken down into different themes and topics, this letter will give you a heads up for each section and give you a quick synopsis of what the students might be discussing and when. It can also give the teachers many ideas about how to best prepare ahead of time for each lesson and recurring themes or materials to look out for. For example, in 5th grade, it explains that lessons 11 through 19 are about the Jewish life cycle, while lessons 20 through 28 are about Israel. Another way to get some more out of your curriculum is to take a look at the curriculum overview, which provides a look of what the common themes for each lesson will be and the Jewish values and topics that you should be prepared to present to the class. Some grades even have supplementary tools such as review games, which are extra optional activities that can be adapted to any topic or lesson that can bring a fun twist into the classroom. Beyond the lesson, there are many tools available in each spiral that allow teachers to dive deeper into their curriculum to find tools that will help them be even more prepared in the classroom. From front to back, every spiral is designed to make every teacher with any experience level feel comfortable and confident in front of the class. To show how many useful tools exist outside what is contained in one lesson, in a second, pause the video and choose one lesson from a grade of curriculum. Quickly look over its themes, values, or topics. Then, find 3 tools outside the lesson in the same spiral that might help you get a better understanding of that lesson, whether it be in the letter to the teacher, the curriculum overview, or a review game that might be good to play during that lesson. Learning how to properly utilize all the tools in the spiral is a great way to get extra help for your lesson. Thank you all so much for joining us today, and we cannot wait to hear all about how you implement these tools into your classroom. For more classroom and teacher tips, make sure to check out other teacher training videos by the ISJL, and for any further questions, reach out to the ISJL or your community education fellow for further information. Teaching is a challenging and rewarding experience. We wish you all the best of luck in this journey. Thank you for joining us.